Let's talk about The Winter's Tale. I should start by saying that this is going to have all of the spoilers. This is a play written in the 1500s. I don't feel guilty. Don't watch it if you don't want to know what happens. Hi, I'm Colleen, and as I've mentioned in previous videos, I am trying to read a lot of Shakespeare this year. I have a lifelong goal to read all of Shakespeare, and I've taken a few years off. And by a few, I mean like 10. So, back on it this year. Started in January, read The Winter's Tale. Absolutely loved it. I'm so excited now to read more Shakespeare. It was fantastic. Before I talk about the play, I listened to this and read it. So I listened to the BBC's Shakespeare sessions, which I found on Spotify, but I think are on multiple podcast type streaming services. And this production was amazing. It was so well voice acted. I can't give it enough praise. I was so excited to listen to it. I would fold laundry and listen to it. I did that 5 days in a row, and it was wonderful. I loved folding my laundry. I loved listening to it. It was such a treat. A little background on The Winter's Tale. It is one of Shakespeare's problem plays. It's considered one of his late romances, which when he released them, they weren't called that, but they've been sort of grouped together with, it's The Winter's Tale, Pericles, The Tempest, and there's one more I can't remember. I'll write it down here. Basically, the first 3 acts of this play are a tragedy, and then the last 2 sort of switch to a comedy, but it doesn't feel as comedic as some of the other comedies. It mainly just ends happily, which is why I do understand classifying this as a romance. Shakespeare classified it as a comedy, though. The play opens, and we've got, I'm going to mispronounce everyone's names because even though I listened to it, I still am not great with pronunciations. So the play opens and we've got the King of Sicily, Leontes, and he and his wife, Hermione, have had Polixenes, who is the king of Bohemia, staying with them for 9 months. Now, Polixenes wants to go home to see his child, and he feels like he's been in Sicily long enough. Leontes tries to convince him to stay, but Polixenes is like, I'm not going to stay. I want to go home. So then Leontes sends in Hermione, his wife, who is pregnant, to talk to him and try and convince him to stay. After Hermione talks to him for a little while, he decides to stay. So Leontes gets really suspicious. He thinks that Polixenes has been having an affair with Hermione and that the child is probably his. And he sort of spirals out of control. If you've read Othello, it's like a similar spiral. Leontes tells Camillo, who's like his nobleman / like does his bidding, to poison Polixenes. But instead, Camillo tells Polixenes he needs to get out of Sicily, and Camillo goes with him and they go to Bohemia. Leontes now goes after Hermione and imprisons her, convinced that she hasn't been a faithful wife. They also have a son who's a little bit older, who's like the heir. Leontes sends 2 of his nobles to the oracle at Delphi to find out whether or not his wife had an affair, and we sort of follow Hermione in prison. Hermione gives birth to a girl who Leontes is like, that's not my child, take the baby and abandon her on like a hillside in Bohemia where her true father lives. So 2 men go and do that. Back to Sicily. Hermione tries to defend herself. Leontes doesn't believe her. The 2 guys come back from the oracle at Delphi and say that she is true and faithful. Leontes says something to the effect of, if that be true, like, if I'm wrong, strike down my family, because he's so blinded by jealousy that he thinks the oracle at Delphi is wrong. So his family is struck down. His wife Hermione dies, his heir dies, and his daughter is basically gone because they've already left to go abandon her in Bohemia. So if the play ended here, it would definitely feel like major tragedy. So now we jump to, we're not yet in the future, but we follow the nobleman who took the daughter to Bohemia. And when they get there, they feel very guilty that they have to abandon this child. So they leave some like stuff with her that like sort of alludes to her identity. When they are leaving, a horrible storm comes and sinks the boat, and the one nobleman left on the island is exit pursued by a bear. Like, That famous line. So that's where it is. He runs off being pursued by a bear. Then they have this great section where like these two shepherds are like, I just saw this man get torn limb from limb by a bear. And it was fantastic. It actually kind of acted hilariously on the audio I was listening to. So I loved it. Basically, a shepherd finds the baby, takes her in. Now we jump till she's like an older teenager. She's of marrying age. And we're ready for the comedy part now. So as the first 3 acts took place mostly in Sicily, this act takes place in Bohemia. So the girl has grown up. Her name is Perdita. She's, of course, the most beautiful shepherd's daughter you've ever seen. She and Florizel, who is the prince of Bohemia, Polixenes' son, are in love. But he's not really allowed to be in love with her because she's not royal. This portion of the play got a little confusing for me because I made the mistake of getting in the car while listening to it. And there's this huge scene at like a fair where there's a lot of different characters. There's people in disguise, and it was definitely hard to follow on audio. So I would recommend reading Act 4, not listening to it while driving. At the party, Polixenes and Camillo, who you'll remember escaped Sicily with Polixenes, go in disguise, and they're sort of like watching Florizel to see what he's going to do, and they watch him become betrothed to Perdita. Polixenes takes off his disguise. It's basically like, you cannot marry her. She's a shepherd's daughter. I don't care how beautiful she is and how much she loves you. He orders his son never to see her again, basically, and if he does, that he will torture and kill both Perdita and her father. Nice guy. So, Florizel and Perdita and Camillo escape to Sicily. In Sicily, Leontes is still in mourning, even though it's been probably like 16 years. He just realizes the errors of his way, how he's been punished for so long. He has no family. He has no heir. He's still in love with Hermione. When Florizel and Perdita arrive, they pretend they're on a diplomatic mission from Bohemia, but then Polixenes arrives to basically say they're lying. But the mystery of Perdita's parentage comes out there. And Leontes is so overwhelmed with joy to be reunited with his daughter. Here's where the play gets a little bit weird. Paulina, who was Hermione's really good friend, basically said that she's been like watching over her grave, and they go into, it's like a tomb because they're wealthy. And there's a statue of Hermione that looks just like her, like she hasn't aged a day. So Leontes gets very upset at seeing her, but then suddenly the statue comes back to life and Hermione's back to life, which is kind of strange, and her and Perdita are reunited, and Leontes, but it doesn't have like a true happy ending because the son doesn't come back to life. Of course, Florizel and Perdita are allowed to be married now because Perdita is the princess of Sicily. So we do end with a wedding. We get Hermione and Leontes are reunited, and for some reason Camillo and Paulina get married, which is just sort of weird, but it does happen. Even though the end's a little bit bananas, I loved this play. It was so well performed by Shakespeare Sessions. I really recommend listening to that version. And I really love this romance. The only other romance I've read is The Tempest, which I didn't really like. I had to read it 3 times for school, and I didn't like it the first time, so then reading it over and over became a bit much. But I really liked The Winter's Tale, and it made me super excited for the rest of the plays I'm going to read this year. I will do a video on each of the Shakespeares that I read this year. Next is going to be Julius Caesar, because I feel like I should read that in March with the Ides of March, and I can't wait now. This has definitely reinvigorated my love of Shakespeare, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you are looking for a maybe a little bit more off the beaten path Shakespeare read, I heartily recommend The Winter's Tale. I will see you soon.